Hello everyone and welcome to the Girls in Movement podcast, where we talk to founders and influencers from across the globe. It's been an exciting past few weeks. So we've just returned from our trip to India, where we connected with schools in local villages, providing them with supplies for their children and thinking of kind of ideas on the next steps for the project. So a huge thank you firstly to everyone who's provided us with the supplies. It's really incredible to have the support. So I'm hugely excited about our guest today, and it's really cool to have this guest kind of on my return from our trip. He started out his incredible radio career on BBC Radio 1, moving to Asian Network, and then 5 Live. I suppose I remember first listening to this guest when my mum would kind of cook in the kitchen or clean in the house and listening to BBC Asian Network. I just absolutely love the way you kind of engaged, embraced, and kind of challenged the Asian community and major topics. His career's led him into kind of DJing, interviewing incredible guests, talk shows, and writing for major publications. So today's on the other side of the interview, and I want to give a warm welcome to Nihal. How are you?
I'm good. How are you? That was a lovely introduction. Wow.
Good stuff. I mean, before we start, so for those of you who don't know, I'm a huge Liverpool fan. Nihal is a Spurs fan. I mean, what a week of comebacks. Do you feel like it's a bit of a dream still?
Yeah, I watched it this morning again. So,
wow.
You know, I'm obsessed. I mean, I just, you know, look, you're a Liverpool fan, so you've done this many times. In fact, you did it last season. I mean, it ended up being a bit of a disaster, but you did end up doing it. But for us, it's pretty much a one-off. You know, you just we don't experience something like this.
Yeah, I mean, four English Premier League teams as well in finals. I mean, the other two, I suppose, are Chelsea and Arsenal, so you're probably not as amazed by those. But yeah, it's still
no, I couldn't care less about that, if I'm honest. Yeah.
I suppose where I want to start is, how did your career start? I mean, did you always want a career in sort of the media or DJing, or was it something else, something different?
I don't think there was ever a plan, really. I just fell in love with music, specifically rap music, hip-hop culture. So the 4 kind of pillars of hip-hop culture, which is the breakdancing and the DJing, the graffiti art and the MCing. And it gave me a sense of belonging, sense that being a little brown boy had significance and importance. And it was music. I mean, that was it, really. I mean, I had this dream of being a rapper, and and just being in recording studios and being on stage and wanting to perform. And yeah, I guess, you know, I wanted that. I wanted a sense of belonging. I wanted some validation, and hip hop culture and hip hop music gave me that sense of validation that, you know, in my primary school years, I just didn't have. You know, I just didn't have that. Wanted to be something, but was never quite kind of important enough, or wasn't the right colour, or, you know, just didn't fit in really in a predominantly white environment in a village in Essex as a little brown boy. You know, you become aware of your difference quite early on, and you can't perhaps quite identify it, but somehow when an argument happens or there's an issue, people take sides, and you're not usually on the side of the majority. And then hip-hop came along, rap came along, and suddenly having melanin wasn't such a bad thing. In fact, it was quite a cool thing, and that changed my life.
Amazing. And so did you start your career out kind of DJing, and was that through kind of on the radio, or were you doing it kind of just?
I never wanted to be on radio. I had no plans to be on radio. I hadn't even thought about radio. It was just all part of, I wanted to be a rapper, not a DJ. So I was MCing, I was signed to record label, I did all kinds of things. You know, we were out there hustling, trying to get a record deal or get our music noticed. That's what we were doing. And so DJing wasn't part of the plan, radio wasn't part of the plan. It was just, these were just things that happened. And then it kind of radio. It was interesting because, you know, I joined Radio 1. I joined Radio 1 as an Asian beats DJ, and I didn't know anything about Bhangra. I didn't know anything about Bollywood, but I knew about music, and I knew about urban music specifically, black music. And of course, so much of what was Asian music was influenced by black music. I mean, even the Bhangra of the time with Dr. Zeus and DJ Sanj, those guys, they were all mixing up hip hop. You know, that's what they wanted. They wanted to make versions of it. There was there's the pure Desi Bhangra of, you know, Kuldeep Manak and Gurdas Maan, etc., etc. But for the British sound, it had to have black music in it. Really, you know, there was, you know, even True School, who is a absolute phenomenon and an amazing producer. Even he, I mean, he's obsessed with hip hop, obsessed with rap producers, and that's where I came from. And Bobby Friction, I think he brought more of the electronica side of it. You know, he brought that element to it, and then he had more of a knowledge of Bhangra because he's Punjabi. You know, even in the Asian scene, you know, you got to understand, in the Asian scene, I was an outsider because I'm Sri Lankan. I'm Sri Lankan Sinhalese. Yeah. You know, so I'm not part of the mainstream of thought of Asians. British Asians tend to be seen as either Pakistani or Bangladeshi, right? And I wasn't either of that. So, you know, I had to prove myself massively to the Asian music scene. Like the electronic part of it, you know, Bad Marsh and Shri, Nitin Sawhney, those guys, they all knew me because I'd worked for Outcast Records. So that side of it knew me, but the whole Bollywood and Bhangra scene, they didn't know me at all. And they didn't want, at the start, there was a lot of like, how has this guy got the job? Who is he? You know, and I had to, you know, I was back and forth to Birmingham all the time. I was, you know, all the record labels, Envy, which was one of the big labels at the time. I was all over that. I knew all those artists. I made it a point to be, you know, at center of it and understand that world, you know.
Yeah, I bet it was like a bit of a kind of challenge to, I suppose, learn music. Like it's a bit of a weird one because you're understanding a different element of music. I mean, if you're into hip hop and rap and stuff, and then suddenly trying to listen to like Bhangra music, it's a completely totally different kind of listening experience, I suppose.
Yeah, it is. But I mean, Bhangra is easier to listen to because Bhangra music primarily is quite straightforward party music. So it's like trying to understand house music in many ways, right? I mean, Bhangra music primarily is designed for hedonism. It's designed for, you know, look how many references there are to alcohol and pretty girls and dancing. Look at the videos. Just the sound of the dol drum and the tumbi is engineered for just to be stripped back, a raw, good time. I mean, that's what it's all about. So in that respect, it wasn't that difficult. I mean, the language was difficult, but to be honest, I was massively I'd worked French hip hop. I'd worked with Arabic rhyme music. So for me, it's never been about the language. It had been about the vibe. So when you hear a record like Punjiri by Gurdas Maan, you don't necessarily have to know anything about the words. Yeah. You don't need to know you don't need to necessarily understand every lyric in Ye Dorsati to just realize it's just such an uplifting piece of music, right? It's just from Sholay. So those kinds of things you just kind of got your head around. The more difficult part was to understand the industry and to be able to spot the new artists that were coming through. You know, that for me was the bigger challenge.
And from you, I suppose, kind of joining the BBC, I mean, was that kind of, they knocked on your door and said, look, we want you to do this? Or was that you kind of going to them and saying, look, this is what I'm working on. I'd love to kind of work with you guys? Or
no, so what happened was the BBC were looking for an Asian Beats show, and they were looking for presenters for Asian Beats. So this was a conversation that had obviously been going on for some time, and they had auditioned a number of people for this, and they'd made their mind up that Bobby Friction was going to be one of the presenters. Now, he had auditioned with another guy who ran a club night in Birmingham called Shanti. And it was pretty much done deal that Bobby Friction and this guy who ran this club night in Birmingham were going to be the presenters. Then on the last day of auditioning, I did the audition. And that threw a spanner in the works, and they ended up sacking off the guy from Shanti because he obviously wasn't good enough.
Oh, wow.
And they put me with Bobby, which obviously must have put Bobby in a very difficult position because, you know, according to the guy from Shanti, they'd organised that they'd either both take it or none of them would take it. But when it came down to it, you know, and you can't blame Bobby for this really, I guess. Bobby said, and this is one side of it, Bobby may have a different story. Bobby accepted their offer, but accepted it with me attached to it. Because I brought something that Bobby didn't have, and Bobby brought something that I didn't have. But what I was bringing was obviously superior to what the other guy had. And the only reason I found out Radio 1 were looking for this was because a friend of mine, who's now a very successful guy in the music industry, he rang me and he said, and he was pretty successful then, he rang me and he said, look, Radio 1 are looking for a specialist DJ, you should go for the job. That was it.
Wow, incredible.
And I did one audition. It was great, obviously. Then I did a second one. It was rubbish, and I thought I'd lost it. But they still decided to go with me. And 17 years later, I'm still at the BBC.
Amazing. And then what made you want to move? So you're obviously doing kind of the music side of things with the BBC, and then it was more kind of, I suppose, talk show. And was that a bit of a change for you as well? Because that's something completely different to kind of, I suppose there was still the mix of the music, but then the types of conversations you were having, it was just kind of more in depth on the radio show. Was that something you pitched to them and said, look, I want to kind of have these open and frank conversations on BBC Asian Network? Or was that something they said to you?
So a man called George Mann at the BBC Asian Network saw a documentary I did for Channel 4. And he said, oh, can you come and do some cover on the phone-in show when Anita Rani, I think it might have been Anita Rani at the time, was doing it. And can you cover for her when she's not doing it? And I started doing it. The audience seemed to like me. The production team thought, okay, this is good. And it just so happened that Anita was, I think, also just wanted to get away from it. She wanted to get away from kind of Asian thing, or maybe she didn't want to get away from it, but it was that her career was just taking off in television. I think she's more she's very much television, Anita. So she was just doing more TV, which came in. And also at the same time, basically Radio 1 was saying to me, you need to get more broadcast time. So in order for us to kind of push you where we want you to go, we want you to go off. So here's the football analogy. We're going to loan you out to the Championship for a season or two to kind of come back into the Premier League. That was the kind of what I was told at the time, because I was also beginning to do bits and bobs of daytime Radio 1. So I was covering for Chris Moyles, or I was covering for Scott Mills, you know, these big iconic shows on Radio 1. So there was all of this kind of going on. And then for me, I didn't see my future in either Radio 1 or DJing. I saw my future being more comfortable in doing speech radio, because speech radio, look, I'm in my late 40s now. Speech radio is something that, you know, I can do until I'm in my 60s. Right? Like it's just, whereas you can't be a Radio 1 DJ, right? In your 60s, right? It's not really cool to you know, this is not going to happen. Like I didn't want to be in a club like DJing. I don't mind being in a club now, but as a punter, but I don't want to be in a club telling loads of 18-year-olds to put their hands in the air. Like I'm not, it doesn't really inspire me or interest me very much anymore to do that.
So, I mean, you're talking to some kind of incredible guests day in and day out, and I absolutely love that you feed what you're kind of, what you're talking about on the radio. It comes through on your kind of social media, and the interaction you get from the public is great as well. Kind of obviously good and bad kind of opinions out there, but obviously that's just kind of the world that we live in. I mean, Are there any kind of standout interviews which have either kind of affected you or changed your opinion on particular topics?
For me, I think that's kind of the question for me that you've asked, because I'm constantly asking people to come out of their echo chamber. And the question really that I have to ask myself is, am I? But then I have to say, well, my job is not to come out of an echo chamber, because I'm representing loads of echo chambers. I'm trying to mash them all together. So I was empathetic to begin with. I think doing the shows has made me more empathetic. It has certainly made me understand the issues. I mean, it depends whether you're talking from a 5 Live perspective or an Asian Network perspective.
Let's go for Asian Network, because I think there's always kind of interesting conversations on there as well. I mean, both.
Well,
but yeah, let's go with Asian Network.
Right. So for me, the thing that disgusts me most is the amount of prejudice that Asians have with each other, right? And how quickly Asians will turn on each other. And it kind of explains how easy it was to colonize India, because we're so easily divided. Caste system, religion, skin color. I mean, there are all of these things, and all of this stuff came out to me when I was hosting that phone-in show that I just found so uncivilized. I just felt, you can't be proud to be Punjabi, for instance, if the Punjab kills more baby girls alongside Haryana than any other state in India. Like, you have to be like, well, this is not acceptable, right? You can't be proud to be, Gujarati, and accept what happened in the Gujarat riots when Muslims were slaughtered. You've got to confront these issues, but people didn't want to confront them. People wanted to be, they were entrenched in their own prejudice. And I'd kind of spent so long fighting prejudice from without the Asian community. And then I came into the Asian community. And, when you do a phone-in show on the BBC Asian Network, you get a crash course on Asians. Like, literally in about 2 years, you can have conversations about the 1984 Sikh massacres, as some people call them, riots, as other people call them, genocide, as other people call them. You get a crash course in this, and it's backfired on me. I had a horrible kind of 6 months with various sections of the Sikh community once, which I fell out with extraordinarily. I was accused of being anti-Muslim, anti-Hindu, anti-Sikh. I've been through all of that on the Asian Network, at the heart of it. And it was always like, especially when you're doing anything about religion, you're essentially walking through a minefield. And I always said to myself, you just disagree with whoever's speaking. That way, if they're all accusing you of being anti, then you're doing a good job, right? If they think you're anti-Muslim, anti-Sikh, and anti-Hindu, that means essentially you're challenging all three of those communities. Yeah. And some of them don't like it. They just don't like it. The fact that Bhindranwala is not a saint to every Sikh is something that people who love Bhindranwala can't accept.
Yeah.
Right? So, you have to challenge them on that. Equally, those who would say, well, no smoke without fire, therefore, the things that happened in 84, you have to challenge that. You can't let people get away with that. And one thing that I always stuck to was, I'm not going to let you get away with that. I'm not, because I'm Sri Lankan, Sinhalese, Buddhist. So I don't care about the centuries of Mughal oppression of Hindus, or Mughal issues with the Sikh community. I don't care. It's not personally part of my culture or my history. Yeah. So I can sit above all of it because I don't have an agenda, right? So it's very difficult, I guess, for a Hindu presenter, say a Brahmin Hindu presenter, to have a conversation about you know, what happened in the Punjab in the 80s, because they'll get accused, whatever they say. I mean, I get accused in the Sri Lankan context. So because I'm Sinhalese, I get accused of being anti-Tamil.
God.
I'm just, but my thing is, I'm anti-ignorance, and I'm anti-bigotry, and I'm anti-opinions masquerading as facts. That's kind of what I'm anti. Everything else, I'm good. But those three things, I'm just anti that. So you can't tell me, you can't complain about how a white colleague was racist to you, and then you say something horrible about a Muslim. Like that doesn't make sense. Or you make your daughter feel bad because she's got dark brown skin. Or when your son was born, you had sweets, but you didn't do the same thing when your daughter was born. Like I can't accept that. I can't just, you know, and BBC bias, you know, BBC, you're supposed to be editorially independent, but you can't be editorially independent of ignorance. Right? You can't be. You can't just allow this shit to happen, you know, and people just think, well, that's fine. And look, I'm not perfect. You know, I've got a boy and a girl, and I've learned so much about how I should talk to them and how I should talk to my daughter, especially because I think Asian women, you know, there are some really terrible things that happen to Asian women, and not just as the media would have it, Muslim women. You know, I've heard from plenty of horrible stories about how Sikh girls have been treated, or lower caste Hindu girls have been treated, or Muslim girls who are not allowed to go to university. I mean, I've heard all of these stories. You know?
And what I find so interesting is, like, being a kind of Asian Sikh girl born and raised in the UK, my parents are from the UK as well. Coming back from India kind of after 21 years, the last time I went was when I was 5, I still just see, I mean, it's bad because I always have a judgment on how kind of young girls are left kind of literally out on the street if they're born into a family and they're a girl. They're literally left out in the street in India. But actually, there's a lot of problems here in the UK, and it's just when you hear stories about young girls, the way they're treated by their family here in the UK, and you're like, your parents are educated, yet they still have this very backward mentality of coming back from India, and they bring it here to the UK, they put it onto their daughters. So I think it's great that someone like you as well is kind of challenging these people to say, for example, like the sweets, like if you're giving it to the boy, it should be given to the girl as well. And these are really like simple things, but in our culture, they're just kind of blown up of proportion, etc. But I mean, one thing for me is when we were at the schools, the teachers would call the boys by their name, but the girls, they would just call the girl, which I just find incredible. It's like from the ages of 5 and 6, you're already saying that the young boy should have a name, that you are just known as the girl, as the same as all the other hundreds of girls in the school as well. So yeah, it's something which is still happening, and I don't know how far away we are from kind of equality in the Asian community.
Well, it's about, I mean, the difficult thing is, what parts of your culture do you keep and which parts of them do you lose? And people are super paranoid over here about their kids becoming quote unquote too westernized.
Yeah.
But you kind of got to ask yourself the question, why are you here? You know, if westernization is so bad, why are you here? There are amazing things about Western culture. You know, in Western culture, widows are not encouraged to throw themselves on funeral pyres, right? Yeah. You know, Western culture, you are not deemed lower caste from birth and told you can't touch the same water as me, you can't sit on the same bus as me. Like, you know, they don't do any of that stuff, right? In Sri Lanka, so in the UK, even with the grooming gangs, right? You imagine what would have happened if a group of white men had targeted Indian girls in India. What would have happened to them? Right? They would have been strung up.
Yeah.
You know, there are people murdered in villages in India because it is claimed that they ate cow. They ate beef.
Incredible.
Right? So we live in a I feel blessed that my parents, and look, this country isn't perfect, no country is, but my God, I can't think of another country, perhaps apart from Canada, where I'd rather live.
Yeah, Very true. I mean, even when you come back from India, you do just I suppose I'm just thankful that kind of I've been born and raised here, educated here. And yeah, I know I find it incredible when people say they have so many issues with the way the Western world is, and it's just kind of like, well, just move back then, or go to a different country, sort of thing. Yeah, it's crazy.
But that's fine. That's fine. And equally, when racists go, well, if you don't like it here, go back home, right?
Yeah.
You are allowed to criticize this country, but you can't expect your children to grow up as if they've grown up in Islamabad or Jalandhar, if they've grown up in Birmingham or West London. I mean, you can't. What you can do is believe in them and trust them. I mean, I don't know if you're aware of your caste. Are you a Jat?
Yeah, I'm a Jat. Yeah.
Right. So are you married?
No.
Would your parents accept you marrying someone who wasn't a Jat?
Yeah, they're open. So I live with my grandparents as well. So interesting question, because it's, would my parents accept that, and then would my grandparents accept that? And in my eyes, yes, they would. But you don't know until the situation happens. They say yes, we would be open to whoever you marry. But yeah, you don't know until you're in the situation. I'd like to think that they would be open to it.
For you, is it about, I'll fall in love with who I want to fall in love with, or would you, out of respect for your parents, try and find a Punjabi Jat?
So interesting as well. So I mean, I'm 26 now, but when I was 21, 22, I was just very open, kind of, I want to be with this person, no matter what caste, what religion they are, whatever the color of their skin is. But then as the conversations get further into a relationship, and as I kind of grew more into kind of understanding my religion a bit more, it became interesting that actually I would like to marry someone who's Sikh, or I mean, whether they're Jat, that doesn't really matter to me personally, because I believe the caste system wasn't part of Sikhism. It was actually just part of culture, not religion, essentially. So for me,
yeah, it's fairly obvious, because I think was it Guru Gobind Singh Ji? I mean, the whole idea of the Khalsa is anti-caste, right?
Yeah. Exactly.
My understanding is that it is completely, the whole idea of being a single core is to make sure that you are not discriminated against.
Yeah,
and I don't know if that was Sri Guru Nanak Dev Ji, or whether it was Sri Guru Gobind Singh Ji. I don't know which guru it was, but I understand. Well, I know it's Guru Gobind Singh Ji that was the 10th guru, and it was the Khalsa. But I mean, the conversation I always used to have on the Asian Network with Sikhs about being Jats. I mean, good grief, Jats love telling the world they're Jats, don't they?
God, yeah, they really do.
They really do. And you're kind of like, okay, fine, that's fine. Be proud of being a Jat, but don't make out that you're. I remember once someone saying to me, they texted and said, "You will never meet a Jat with a bad job," right?
Oh God.
And someone tweeted going, "Oh, that's interesting, because the caretaker at our school's a Jat," right? No disrespect to caretakers, but it isn't a hedge fund manager or a surgeon. So it was like the kind of arrogance of that. So I mean, look, I've got a daughter and a son, and you have to think, okay, what if they're gay? Fine.
Yeah.
Okay. Fine for me. Sadness, because I worry about the bigotry in society against people who are gay. What if they marry someone of a completely different culture? If I love my children as much as I say I do, then I want them to be happy.
Yeah.
And their happiness should not be based on my approval or not, based on culture. And my brother and I both married Sri Lankan, Buddhist, same caste women. We both did. And our parents never asked us to. My first girlfriend was Jamaican. My last girlfriend before I met Isha was Swedish. who I met in Stockholm. So I'd never been out with a Sri Lankan girl before, and suddenly it was all good. And we both married, and my mum now has 3 Sri Lankan grandchildren. Well, yeah. So I mean, one thing I realised massive from the Asian network is that I don't want to spend my life beating myself up over, are they going to be this? Are they going to be that?
Yeah.
I don't own my children.
No.
I was involved in their birth, and I at this point in time, I house them, I clothe them, I feed them. Hopefully, I inspire them in some ways. Other ways, I'm giving them really terrible habits because I'm never on time for anything, so, as you've discovered. So there's all kinds of things we're trying to do. But one thing I'm not going to worry about is who they're going to marry and are they a good Buddhist or I just seen too many people. Yeah, I just remember once someone telling me that when they go to their parents' house, their parents have pictures of every single one of their grandchildren other than this person's children because she married out of caste. So when her kids go around to their grandparents, they don't see any photos of them. And I thought to myself, how ignorant is that?
Yeah.
Like, how ignorant is that? That is, you get no excuses for your culture. There's no get out clause for that, right? You don't go, well, that's our culture. If she decides to go out, then her children we won't have pictures of them up. I mean, are you nuts? Like, are you like clinically, certifiably bonkers?
Yeah,
I can't get that. I don't get how you would sacrifice your own happiness because of what the community will think. Forget the community, man. Like, if you're not paying my mortgage, I'm not interested. You don't have a say. You don't have a vote.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
I mean, and that's kind of what I tried to get across to the Asian network audience, really.
Yeah, I mean, and that's probably why you've kind of been challenged as well, because they hate hearing that, because they think the culture is kind of the main thing, and it's culture's great as well. Don't get me wrong, but I mean, come on, there's
amazing parts of the culture. There are amazing parts of the culture. You're right, but they aren't it. No, they are not it.
Let's talk about, the British Asian Trust and how you got involved. I mean, it's an incredible project. It's done hugely successful things within the Asian community. Are there any kind of key successes which stand out for you, or challenges that you kind of witnessed being a part of the trust?
I think the main challenge is to engage the young British Asian diaspora with it.
Right.
Because I don't think they know about it. I don't think they care about it. And it's great. It's Prince Charles and lots of millionaires and billionaires hanging around and giving money, and it's great. And all that work that is done, incredible work that is done in country, is great. And the model of it, of social entrepreneurship, whereby there are social impact bonds. So you're almost bringing a kind of business model, investment model, to get returns on what you're doing, and those returns will only come to you if those projects that you are involved in actually affect change.
Yeah.
And ultimately, I think for many years, charities haven't quite got it right in terms of how do we measure success? What does success look like? And you need longer term goals. You can't, like, it's that thing, isn't it? Is you buy them fish, or you buy them a fishing net and a boat.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly.
I mean, that's the simple thing about it. And so British Asian Trust is great because it's got Prince Charles's seal of approval. He's the founding patron. He deeply cares about South Asia. He has a great love for it that his great uncle Earl Mountbatten instilled in him, and it's it's work. I think the one thing it's missing is its connection with people like you, right? I mean, you and most of your mates will probably have no idea about the British Asian Trust.
No, they wouldn't.
Right? They wouldn't, they wouldn't know what it does. They wouldn't know why it's there. And yet these same people that will go to India and looking for ways perhaps to help India because they care about, they go to Punjab and they'll look at the issues around alcohol and drug abuse, and they'll think, well, wow, we need to help. Like, how can we help? There's the choice, right? You just go, okay, well, how do I help? Go, okay, here's a way you can help the British Asian Trust.
Yeah.
So I think there's a lot of marketing work that needs to be done, and it can't just be around, someone from Hollyoaks and someone like Naughty Boy, right? It just can't be just those guys.
Yeah.
So
it can't just be kind of celebrity faces. It needs to be more of like, what are we actually trying to kind of, I suppose, solve? I mean, there's so many kind of different issues within the Asian community. There's so many things to celebrate. There's so many things to change. So I suppose it's seeing real people, which I rarely see. When I see the British Asian Trust, I rarely see people like me, I suppose, who kind of want to make a change. I'm not saying that there's celebrities who don't want to make a change. Definitely not, because there are. But is it just to say that you're Asian, join this community sort of thing? It's
quite. And in the past, I think some of the celebrities, some of them, I certainly got the feeling it was more about turning up and having their photo taken with Prince Charles than it was about really worrying, and the British Asian Trust themselves are wary of that, and they want to make sure that anyone who is an ambassador is doing it for the right reasons and wants to be there,
And you've got a night for Sri Lanka coming up as well. So what an amazing campaign. Is that something that you've kind of put together? Because I know you've got kind of a host of different comedians and kind of faces as well. So
so 2 weeks ago, my wife was sitting up in bed and she went, we've got to do something for Sri Lanka. Like, no one else is doing anything.
Yeah.
And, I've got a little bit of profile, and luckily a mate of mine is Ramesh Ranganathan, also British Sri Lankan, and I just texted him and said, we need to do something, and he was like, yeah, we do. And within an hour he'd got the Indigo O2 booked, and within 3 days we'd got a lineup of comedians. Well, he'd got a lineup of comedians because they're all on his management thing off the curb. So and then I think we've pretty much sold it out, 2,000 tickets, British Asian Trust sponsoring, Ramesh Ranganathan, Catherine Ryan, Harry Hill, Joe Brand, Rob Beckett.
Amazing.
I mean, it's an extraordinary lineup.
It's great for you as well, obviously, kind of from a Sri Lankan background. I just found it, when I saw it, I was like, thankfully there are people who are doing something. But isn't it crazy that something like that happens and no one did anything, really? I didn't see anything on social media about helping.
I think look, as my wife rightly said, Prameet, we should be doing it. Like, we're Sri Lankan, we should be doing it. I shouldn't wait for Steve or Sandra to do something. I should do something.
Yeah.
Right. And we did, and we want to keep doing it. We want to make sure that Sri Lanka is in people's minds. And the British Asian Trust are collecting the money for us. They will then, because they're transparent and they've got the organisation to be able to make sure that you can trace every penny. They've also got on the ground in Sri Lanka people that can look into anywhere where we give money to. And we're very much about a medium and long-term issues revolving around the people whose lives have been changed by this. So post-traumatic stress disorder, mental health issues, that's what we're interested in, really. The children, how they're going to be prepared through therapy to deal with their loss, to deal with what's gone on, the violence that's been around them. So that's what we want to put the money towards, and we'll be clear with the people on the night, this money will not be spent like next week.
Yeah.
It might take months before we find exactly where the needs are, because we're still just a month away from this, right? This is still a relatively new thing that has happened. So
and I suppose you don't know, as you said, post-traumatic stress, like you don't know how this will affect people 6 months, 12 months down the line, I suppose.
No idea. Absolutely. Got no idea. So, you know, in that respect, we just need to wait and see. We need to speak to people who are there, who are dealing with them and saying, right, this is what is needed. So bear, you know, I'm going to say this to the audience on Sunday night, so bear with us. You know, if you don't see something spent straight away, we haven't done anything with it, right? As we do things, as we speak to people, you will see what we are doing. And that's, but in the short term, just, I'll thank people for just coming, you know, just spending that money and deciding, yeah, you know, they're great comedians, but this feels good to me to come and support an event like this. You know, that's an amazing, it's an amazing thing.
Yeah, no, it's an incredible event, and yeah, it's great to see, and it's good to also hear that is it sold out or nearly sold out?
Oh yeah, I mean, I can't even think of it. Maybe like 10 or 20 or 30 tickets left. Also, all those tickets were like right at the back, standing. You know, I mean, it's you know, you can't get a seat. You won't get a seat. All of those are gone, long gone. So it's an incredible night. Yeah. You know, so we want to raise, and also as well, the British Asian Trust has provided us with a text number, so people can text anything between £1 and £20
Great.
to that number, and then that'll be collected as well. Yeah, so it's good.
Great initiative.
Good, you know?
So moving on to kind of my final question, it's one that I ask kind of all my guests when they come onto the show. So if you could give your younger self any advice, what would it be?
You know what it would be? It would be believe in yourself. The fact that you're in the room means that you deserve to be in the room. And it took me years to not feel as though I was inferior or that someone was doing me a massive favor by having me in the room. You know, definitely to believe in myself. Or from a younger age, it would have been just to not rely on everyone else for your own validation.
Yeah.
You know, to just say, well, okay, I'm good. Like I'm learning. I'm still. I mean, even at this age, I'm still learning. 100%, still learning. You know, there's still so much to understand and absorb. You know, so the younger self, there'd be a lot of things, I think, but that would be the main thing, because it wouldn't be any career things or you shouldn't have done that, because everything has led me to this point.
Exactly.
Now, everything has led me to this point now, and and you can't change any of that stuff, because it may have led you into, you know, if I hadn't done some bit of rapping, then I may not have become a DJ. If I'm a DJ, I would join Radio 1. Radio 1 took me to Sri Lanka, was where I met my wife. So there's all kinds, do you know what I mean? Like, so there's all kinds of things that I wouldn't change any of that. But one thing I would be is just believe in myself from a lot earlier.
No,
Now I'm like only since I joined 5 Live, if I'm honest, that I'm really like, I'm good at this. Like I'm because when you're doing phone-ins on the Asian Network and debates and everyone's telling you, oh, well, that's a good debate and that interview was good and blah, 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 it's fine. But ultimately, it is a small audience.
Yeah.
So you really, again, it's Championship versus Premier League. But once you can score goals in the Premier League, which is what I've been doing since I joined 5 Live, then you get that kind of, okay, yeah, I'm good at this. I know what I'm doing. Like,
you are.
I got skills. Yeah, well, you know, it takes a while, right? And you can never get complacent about it. Every interview should be a challenge, you know, to get the best out of the interviewee and have little nuggets of knowledge. Just I interviewed Kiefer Sutherland the other day, and he was like, oh wow, how did you know that? You've really done your research. Then I interviewed Guy Chambers, who wrote most of the Robbie Williams hits the other day, and he said exactly the same thing. He said, wow, how did you know that? And you know, those kind of moments where you get people on side because you've done your research and you know what you're talking about. On Monday, I'm going to the the government's chemical weapons testing place at Porton Down. It's the first time a radio show has been able to broadcast from a place like that. So, you got to know your stuff, right, about chemical weapons and about explosives and the work that they do at Porton Down and the secrets that they hold and,
Absolutely love it. And thank you so much, Nihal. I mean, you've been an incredible guest, and I absolutely love kind of listening to your shows. And now that you're on kind of 5 Live as well, it's definitely kind of branched out the different topics that you're talking about. For those of you who are listening as well, I'll provide all the social media details. I'll provide details of the kind of event which is happening. Is it this weekend? The event for Sri Lanka?
Yeah, it's called A Night for Sri Lanka at the Indigo O2.
Amazing.
Yeah, Sunday night from 7:30 p.m.
Nice. Amazing. Thank you so much, Nihal.
No, you're welcome. I'm sorry it's taken so long.
So